This is the story of Neville Brand. On screen, he specialized in playing ruthless gangsters. But in real life, this man was a highly decorated veteran from World War II. Neville did not die from bullets or violence. Lung disease finished the old soldier off in a hospital room, out of money and forgotten. Why did a hero who once saved his comrades choose to lock himself away and drink himself to death? April 16, 1992. A sterile, isolated medical room inside Sutter General Hospital in Sacramento, California. The electronic heart monitors beep rhythmically in the quiet ward. Neville Brand is exactly 71 years old. The man is decidedly not dying from a dramatic cinematic shootout or a violent street brawl. A severe terminal case of emphysema is methodically destroying his respiratory system. The progressive lung disease physically suffocates the patient, slowly and mercilessly stripping away every single breath. The illness ravaged his chest cavity, destroying the delicate air sacs and trapping the stale air deep inside the lungs. It is an incredibly cruel, agonizingly slow physical death for a man who previously survived fierce Nazi artillery fire. There are no flashing camera lenses inside this quiet hospital room. There is no huge crowd of devoted Hollywood fans waiting nervously outside the automatic sliding doors. The American entertainment industry moved on from this aging performer decades ago. The harsh reality for many decorated combat veterans of the greatest generation often ends exactly like this. These soldiers survived the very worst military slaughter overseas, only to slowly deteriorate in profoundly anonymous medical wards or quiet state nursing homes. The former leading man takes one final labored breath and stops moving. The physical end is almost silent and anticlimactic. This quiet medical death stands in sweeping, jarring contrast to the public image he deliberately projected for over 30 years. On the silver screen, Brand was the ultimate physical brute. The actor built a staggering, lucrative career specifically playing ruthless thugs, violent mobsters, and hardened criminals. Brand constantly handled heavy prop firearms and engaged in brutal staged fistfights. The major studio executives deliberately typecast the performer because his physical face looked genuinely tough, severely scarred, and profoundly weathered. Hollywood greatly capitalized on that specific menacing aura. The actor famously portrayed the legendary mobster Al Capone in the blockbuster hit television series The Untouchables. The public bought into this manufactured illusion. They saw a natural-born killer laughing maniacally on their television screens. The American audience blindly assumed the harsh, gravelly voice and the cold, dead stare were simply the authentic traits of a genuinely dangerous individual. A popular industry rumor frequently circulated, claiming he was actually a real-life street criminal before miraculously discovering acting. Many terrified co-stars genuinely believed the man possessed a natural, uncontrollable violent streak. The studio publicity departments never bothered to correct these dark, intensely profitable rumors. It was advantageous to let the audience believe they were watching a genuine monster. Yet the physical reality lying cold on that Sacramento hospital bed contradicted that Hollywood fiction. The dying man was remarkably fragile, totally broken down by decades of heavy chain smoking and severe chronic alcohol abuse. The tough guy persona was merely a professional costume. The people closest to him knew the truth behind the drinking and the sudden violent outbursts. The veteran was a man who internalized immense amounts of horrific psychological trauma. The daily drinking was certainly not simply a reckless Hollywood party habit. It was a brutal, systematic self-medication strategy. The survivor purposefully used cheap liquor to forcefully drown out the relentless screaming memories embedded inside his brain. The emphysema that ultimately killed him was the direct physical result of decades spent fiercely inhaling cheap tobacco, just to artificially calm his severely shattered nerves. The studio system paid the actor handsomely to act like a violent sociopath, blindly ignoring the fact that the performer was suffering from severe, undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. In the 1950s and 60s, the federal medical system simply labeled this extreme mental anguish as combat fatigue and ignored the root causes. The entertainment industry happily exploited the psychological scars permanently carved into his face by real-world shrapnel. The aftermath of his death introduces an incredibly bizarre, specific visual detail. After the hospital officially pronounced the patient dead, the family immediately arranged a very private, quiet cremation. The physical remains of the veteran were subsequently transported to East Lawn Memorial Park. This is a meticulously manicured historic cemetery located in Sacramento. When you physically visit the specific indoor columbarium niche holding his ashes, you do not see a standard metallic or ceramic urn. You do not see any military imagery or standard Hollywood iconography. You do not see a replica firearm or a tough cinematic quote engraved on a metal plaque. The ashes of this supposed Hollywood thug are securely sealed inside a unique, customized stone container. The urn is physically carved to look exactly like a closed hardcover book. The object sits perfectly upright behind the protective glass pane. The spine of this solid stone book simply bears his name, Neville Brand. The physical craftsmanship is exceptionally detailed, accurately mimicking the textured paper pages and the thick leather binding of a classic historical novel. It is a delicate, intellectual, artistic choice for a man widely famous for throwing barroom punches on camera. The deliberate choice of a book-shaped urn effectively shatters the one-dimensional public narrative. The stone book silently demands that cemetery visitors read far past the superficial Hollywood cover. It represents the vast, unspoken chapters of his actual life that the Hollywood machine deliberately suppressed. The presence of that specific stone object forces an uncomfortable question. Why exactly did the family deliberately place the ashes of a famous screen thug inside an object representing quiet reflection and significant history? To accurately decipher this specific physical clue, we must leave the sterile California hospital behind. We have to physically examine the actual, firmly classified historical military records. We must travel directly back to the freezing, mud-soaked battlefields of the European theater. That is the exact location where he picked up a real, loaded combat weapon. That is where the young soldier looked directly into the face of actual, horrifying death. To find the true man hiding behind the customized stone book, you must bypass the studio press releases and open the classified files of the United States military. The Hollywood publicity machine frequently invented colorful, fictional backstories for contract players to secretly sell movie tickets. The entertainment industry pushed lucrative rumors claiming the actor was a genuine street thug before discovering the cameras. The official military records of Neville Brand require zero corporate fabrication. Brand was officially assigned to the 331st Infantry Regiment of the 83rd Infantry Division. This tactical unit saw some of the most brutal, merciless combat in the entire European theater. The soldier was a genuine, boots-on-the-ground infantryman, marching directly through the deadly meat grinder of the Second World War. The studio audiences watched him handle prop revolvers on safe television sets, but the federal government rigorously trained the young man to systematically kill human beings with military-grade weaponry. Look directly at the official combat citation dated March 1, 1945. The American infantry unit was engaged in a fierce tactical advance through hostile German territory. the advancing soldiers suddenly encountered colossal, concentrated enemy fire. A fortified German machine gun nest effectively pinned the entire American squad down in the freezing mud. The enemy defensive position was strategically located inside a reinforced stone hunting lodge. The machine gun crew was directly supported by trained snipers, hidden in the surrounding dense tree line. The tactical situation on the ground was genuinely desperate. The enemy possessed overwhelming fire superiority. The American soldiers were dying rapidly in the dirt. On a standard movie set, the director simply yells, "Cut!" and the stuntmen immediately stand back up. In this specific German forest, the lethal lead tearing through human flesh was real. Neville Brand did not wait for a shouted tactical order from a superior officer. The young soldier broke from the minimal defensive cover. The soldier executed a dangerous, totally solo flanking maneuver directly through the heavy enemy crossfire. The hero charged the fortified hunting lodge alone. The infantrymen breached the fortified structure and systematically eliminated the entire machine gun crew. The infantrymen neutralized the hidden snipers, thoroughly destroying the enemy's stronghold and directly saving the lives of the surviving squad members. The United States government officially awarded the young man the Silver Star for gallantry in action. This is the third highest military decoration for combat valor awarded by the American Armed Forces. It was not a shiny prop medal pinned on a wardrobe costume. It was a physical receipt for extreme lethal violence. But the brutal mathematical reality of the European front lines dictates that individual heroism rarely guarantees physical survival. The aggressive American push deep into German territory continued relentlessly. On April 7, 1945, his regiment was tasked with a colossal tactical assault directly across the Weser River. River crossings are universally considered one of the most dangerous, extremely vulnerable tactical operations in standard infantry combat. The advancing American troops were severely exposed in the open water and trapped on the muddy banks. The German defensive forces launched a major, fiercely coordinated counterattack to halt the amphibious river crossing. The strategic importance of the Weser River meant the German forces defended the shoreline with fanatical desperation. Nazi commanders ordered their frontline troops to hold the eastern bank at all costs. The enemy deployed heavy panzer tanks alongside entrenched infantry battalions. The freezing temperature of the rushing water caused immediate hypothermia for many advancing Americans before they even reached the opposite side. Artillery shells violently shattered the riverbanks. Concentrated machine gun fire tore through the advancing American lines, cutting men to pieces in the water. During the chaotic height of this brutal slaughter, a high-velocity German bullet violently struck Brand directly in the upper right arm. The physical trauma of a military-grade gunshot wound is devastating and immediately incapacitating. The hot lead violently shattered the dense muscle tissue and brutally severed major blood vessels directly inside his right bicep. The severely wounded soldier immediately collapsed directly into the cold, muddy riverbank. The casualty was trapped inside the active kill zone. Enemy fire relentlessly blanketed the entire immediate area, making any rapid medical rescue physically impossible. The dedicated combat medics were totally pinned down by the heavy mortar barrage. The young infantryman lay bleeding profusely in the freezing German mud. The rapid, vast blood loss immediately triggered severe physiological shock. The human body instinctively begins to shut down non-essential biological functions as the internal blood volume rapidly drops. The freezing water of the Weser River intensely accelerated the physical deterioration. Lying on the muddy banks, heavily bleeding out, the young soldier confronted the absolute finality of his own brief existence. The survivor was isolated from his unit, rapidly losing consciousness. Decades later, the veteran explicitly described the exact physical and psychological sensation of that specific near-death experience. The spoken words are incredibly chilling, stripping away the standard glorious, patriotic myths of combat death. The wounded man stated clearly, "I knew I was dying. It was a very pleasant feeling, like being half drunk." This brutally honest, raw statement forcefully reveals the permanent psychological fracture caused by extreme combat trauma. The intense physical pain of the shattered arm was overridden by the sudden, terrifyingly peaceful chemical dump directly inside the dying brain. Severe arterial blood loss induces rapid cerebral hypoxia, starving the brain of vital oxygen. The bleeding soldier did not feel grand patriotic glory or cinematic heroism. He felt the cold, numbing intoxication of impending death. The psychological trauma of consciously making complete peace with death in the freezing mud fundamentally alters the human brain architecture. You do not simply wash that specific sensation off and easily return to normal civilian society. The severely wounded soldier lay bleeding on that riverbank, fully accepting the absolute end. But the end did not actually arrive on that specific April afternoon. Brand miraculously survived the catastrophic arterial blood loss. The casualty was eventually evacuated from the active combat zone, successfully patched up in a military field hospital, and officially shipped back to the United States. The infantrymen returned home carrying the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, and a shattered psyche. The combat veteran utilized the financial benefits of the GI Bill to earnestly study acting, desperately seeking a civilian purpose after the extreme adrenaline of the war. The newcomer stepped directly into the sprawling, polished machinery of the American entertainment business. The prospect carried the invisible scars of the Weser River directly into the casting rooms. But the powerful studio executives did not see a decorated American hero standing in front of them. They looked directly at the hardened, scarred face of a traumatized combat veteran and saw something incredibly dark and remarkably profitable. What exactly did the brutal Hollywood system ruthlessly force this genuine war hero to become on the silver screen? The brutal Hollywood system transformed a genuine, exceptionally decorated American war hero into the ultimate cinematic villain. After the military doctors finally discharged the severely wounded soldier from the recovery ward, Neville Brand returned directly to the United States. Brand was officially a civilian again, but the combat veteran possessed zero functional civilian skills. The federal government provided the GI Bill. This was a large financial program, specifically designed to fully pay for the higher education of returning veterans. Most returning soldiers utilized this government money to study engineering, accounting, or standard corporate business. Brand made a profoundly unorthodox, unexpected choice. The hardened infantryman chose to study theatrical acting. The veteran officially enrolled at the prestigious American Theater Wing in New York City. The student studied alongside other future Hollywood heavyweights, diligently learning the technical skills of voice projection, stage movement, and emotional recall. The psychological reasoning behind this specific choice is fiercely debated by historians today. Many clinical psychologists strongly theorize that acting provided a vital, crucially necessary psychological escape hatch. Stepping directly into a purely fictional character allowed the severely traumatized veteran to safely hide his profound internal pain behind a carefully memorized script. It was a desperate coping mechanism funded by the federal government. The aspiring performer eventually traveled west to Los Angeles, fully expecting to build a versatile, widely respected acting career. But the Hollywood studio system operates on a brutally superficial, rigidly visual metric. Television in the 1950s and 60s relied on instant visual recognition. The audiences needed to immediately know who the bad guy was the exact second he walked through the door. The powerful casting directors looked directly at the newly arrived actor. They ignored the prestigious Silver Star and the Purple Heart. The studio executives only saw the towering physical frame, the craggy, severely weathered face, and heard the incredibly rough, gravelly voice. Brand provided that instant, terrifying visual cue. The entertainment industry immediately labeled the man as a natural-born killer. The cruel, intensely bitter paradox of his entire professional career officially began right inside those casting rooms. The genuine combat hero was forced to play the absolute worst, irredeemable dregs of human society. The veteran sold his rugged face and intimidating physical presence for a steady, hugely lucrative studio paycheck. The studios strictly wanted a terrifying heavy, and the former soldier fully delivered. Look directly at the extensive filmography. The actor appeared in nearly 100 different cinematic and television projects. Almost every single role required him to be violently evil. In the classic 1950 film noir DOA, the performer played a brutally sadistic, utterly unhinged henchman named Chester. His specific job in the movie was to physically assault and violently torture the main protagonist. The director explicitly instructed the actor to look devoid of basic human empathy. In 1953, he appeared in the critically acclaimed war film Stalag 17, playing Duke, an aggressive, intensely cynical prisoner of war. In 1954, the actor starred in Riot in Cell Block 11. The performer portrayed James Dunn, a thoroughly dangerous, incredibly violent, maximum security prison inmate who forcefully leads a bloody, intensely destructive riot against the armed guards. The talent was utterly believable as a hardened, ruthless convict. Brand later played a brutal, unsympathetic prison guard in Birdman of Alcatraz, but his most famous villainous role occurred on network television. The producers of the giant hit series The Untouchables hired the veteran to portray the legendary, remarkably ruthless Chicago mob boss Al Capone. His portrayal of the mobster was so intense and threatening that it permanently solidified his reputation as the ultimate television heavy. The mobster spoke with a harsh, strongly forced Brooklyn accent, viciously threatening to murder rival gang members with cold, dead eyes. The American public hated the characters he played. The studio executives loved the large box office returns. The industry trap was permanently locked around his neck. The veteran actor desperately wanted to break this aggressive, restrictive typecasting. The star hated being universally recognized on the street as a violent, terrifying criminal. The man begged his talent agents to find him sympathetic, positive roles. A rare, unusual opportunity finally arrived in 1965 with the television western series Laredo. Brand successfully secured the lead role of Texas Ranger Reese Bennett. This specific character was radically different from the standard mobsters and psychopaths. Reese Bennett was boisterous, comically slow-witted, and incredibly loud, but he was fundamentally a genuinely good, fiercely loyal person. The character rode horses, delivered funny punchlines, and bravely protected innocent townsfolk. The man finally portrayed a character who utilized a badge and a gun to genuinely help people, closely mirroring his actual military service. The public undeniably loved this softer, purely comedic performance. The television show was a soaring ratings hit, running successfully for 2 full seasons. For a brief period, the actor finally got to play the actual good guy on screen. The star proved he possessed superb comedic timing and genuine on-screen warmth. The veteran genuinely smiled on a studio set for the very first time in years. Fellow cast members quickly noted a distinct lightness in his physical demeanor when he did not have to pretend to murder innocent people. The performer frequently joked with the camera operators and thoroughly enjoyed the light-hearted Western atmosphere. The daily production schedule finally felt like a creative joy rather than a psychological prison. However, this notable success was extremely temporary. A single comedic Western series was decidedly not enough to permanently erase decades of ingrained villainous typecasting. The Hollywood executives quickly shoved him right back into the familiar violent criminal box the exact moment Laredo officially ended. The rigid studio system simply refused to let the actual hero consistently play a hero. The casting directors ignored his verified comedic talent and immediately handed him more scripts demanding violence and cold stares. Playing these fiercely aggressive bad guys successfully generated enormous amounts of money for the veteran. The celebrity easily bought the big house, drove the expensive cars, and lived the comfortable, vastly envied Hollywood lifestyle. But the human brain is an exceptionally complex, fragile biological organ. It does not successfully differentiate between a real battlefield and a rigged movie set. The major studios constantly paid the actor to hold prop firearms and vigorously participate in intense, realistic, choreographed shootouts. Every single time a director yelled "action," and a loud prop gun violently exploded on the closed soundstage, his brain instantly triggered a severe, horrifying chemical reaction. The sudden loud noises instantly dragged his traumatized mind straight back to the freezing German mud and the deadly machine gun fire. The intense adrenaline spikes, the severe hyperventilation, and the cold sweats were unquestionably real. The studio crew simply thought he was utilizing method acting to prepare for a violent scene. They utterly failed to realize they were watching a severely damaged combat veteran suffer through intense, untreated panic attacks. He was physically acting on a safe, strictly controlled studio lot, but he was psychologically reliving the absolute worst moments of the Second World War every single day. The severe internal pressure was steadily building to a truly catastrophic breaking point. And the worst psychological collision between his hidden wartime trauma and his fictional Hollywood career violently exploded during the filming of a controversial episode of The Twilight Zone. The worst psychological collision violently exploded on the closed soundstage of The Twilight Zone. In 1964, Neville Brand successfully secured a major prominent guest starring role in an episode explicitly titled The Encounter. The standard studio scripts usually required the veteran to play purely fictional mobsters or exaggerated Western outlaws. This specific script demanded something exceptionally different and dangerous. The character was formally written as a bitter, severely traumatized American combat veteran specifically haunted by horrific lethal actions committed during the Second World War. The director explicitly required the actor to physically stand in front of the rolling cameras and intensely deliver long, intricately detailed monologues graphically describing the brutal mechanics of killing human beings in close-quarters combat. The television producers pushed for raw, visceral realism. They failed to understand they were blindly lighting a huge psychological match directly inside a volatile room. The established American medical community in the 1960s lacked the diagnostic vocabulary to properly categorize extreme combat trauma. The federal government simply labeled shattered veterans as suffering from acute combat fatigue. The doctors essentially told returning soldiers to blindly ignore the internal terror and immediately assimilate back into standard civilian society. The specific clinical term post-traumatic stress disorder did not formally exist in the psychiatric diagnostic manuals. The severe physical symptoms of PTSD are involuntary. A severely traumatized brain stores horrific sensory memories as immediate, present physical threats. When the studio director loudly yelled "action" On the Twilight Zone set, the meticulously constructed fictional scenario brutally intersected with the real, actual trauma permanently carved into the mind of the actor. The actor began verbally reciting the script describing brutal battlefield slaughter. The brain of the veteran bypassed the safe physical reality of the Hollywood soundstage. The severe sensory trigger violently snapped the psychological tether holding the man together. The towering, imposing Hollywood heavy broke down physically right in front of the entire active camera crew. The severe panic attack was definitely not a calculated acting choice. It was a colossal, uncontrollable biological reaction. The veteran began visibly hyperventilating, unable to pull adequate oxygen into his lungs. The actor began crying violently, producing deep, heavy sobs that physically shook his large frame. The total loss of physical and emotional control was utterly terrifying to witness. The hardened screen thug violently pushed past the confused studio technicians, intensely sprinting away from the hot production lights. The runaway ran directly toward his assigned personal dressing trailer. The fugitive violently slammed the heavy metal door shut and immediately engaged the internal locks. The multi-million-dollar television production instantly slammed to a complete, expensive halt. The assistant directors nervously banged on the locked metal door, desperately demanding the actor return to the active set. Brand refused to answer. The veteran remained barricaded inside the tiny trailer, totally consumed by the loud screaming memories of the Weser River and the brutal machine gun nests. The studio producers were furious. Time on a television set equals huge amounts of corporate money. They threatened to fine the actor or immediately terminate the strict union contract. But a completely different man suddenly stepped directly onto the chaotic soundstage. Rod Serling was the legendary creator, primary writer, and recognizable host of The Twilight Zone. Serling possessed immense creative control over the successful television series. But more importantly, the famous writer shared a profound, unique, invisible bond with the terrified man locked inside the trailer. Rod Serling was also a highly decorated American combat veteran. Serling served as a paratrooper in the 11th Airborne Division, experiencing horrific, brutal combat against Japanese forces in the Philippines. The host intimately understood the exact, specific physical terror consuming the barricaded actor. The famous writer witnessed his own close friends killed by falling shrapnel during the bloody liberation of Manila. Serling suffered from severe night terrors and chronic insomnia long after returning to normal civilian life. The visionary creator essentially channeled his own lingering battlefield trauma into writing complex science fiction scripts. The writer dismissed the angry producers and the confused camera crew, ordering everyone to clear the immediate area. Serling slowly approached the locked metal door alone. The exact details of the physical interaction remain hidden from the official public record. Serling spoke quietly through the thin metal door. The locks eventually clicked open. The famous writer stepped inside the dark trailer and firmly closed the door behind him. For exactly 10 agonizing minutes, the two decorated combat veterans sat alone inside the cramped Hollywood dressing room. The standard studio crew stood nervously outside, waiting for the production to officially collapse. Nobody knows exactly what words were exchanged in the dark. The writer bypassed the standard Hollywood corporate pressure. The colleague did not threaten the actor with serious lawsuits or career destruction. Clinical psychologists strongly theorize that Serling purposefully utilized precise combat de-escalation techniques, effectively grounding the terrified veteran back into the present physical reality. He validated the deep internal terror, utilizing the shared unspoken language of men who actually survived heavy artillery fire. Exactly 10 minutes later, the heavy metal door finally swung open. Brand stepped slowly out of the dark trailer. The intense physical panic attack was gone. His breathing was well regulated, and his eyes were intensely focused. The professional walked directly back to the hot, brightly lit set. The talent hit his designated tape mark and delivered a fiercely intense, flawless dramatic performance that anchored the controversial episode. The studio executives simply celebrated the saved production schedule and the rich incoming revenue. They fundamentally failed to comprehend the profound psychological rescue that just occurred. The permanent impact of that specific 10-minute conversation was irrefutably confirmed over a decade later. When Rod Serling tragically died in 1975, Neville Brand attended the publicized funeral service. Standing near the casket, the weathered actor delivered a profoundly specific emotional statement to the surrounding press. The survivor stated clearly, "If it were not for Rod, I would not be here today. He saved my life once." This raw public admission confirmed the grave severity of the studio breakdown. The writer successfully pulled the fellow veteran directly out of a dangerous psychological spiral. But Rod Serling could not permanently shadow the actor through the rest of the brutal Hollywood career. The famous writer successfully neutralized a single, catastrophic panic attack, but the core underlying trauma remained untreated and intensely active. When the hot production lights finally shut down and the actor returned to an empty house, the brutal, screaming memories immediately returned. Facing the stark, terrifying isolation, Brand reached for a readily accessible destructive chemical off-switch. What exactly did the veteran utilize to silence the constant, horrifying noise inside his head? To forcefully silence the constant, horrifying noise inside his head, the veteran turned directly to a widely accessible, legal, and intensely destructive chemical. He purposefully utilized immense amounts of alcohol to violently suppress the active combat trauma. In the mid-20th century, the American medical system failed returning combat soldiers. The veteran absolutely did not have a dedicated clinical psychologist. He did not possess a safe therapeutic environment to process the profound trauma of the Weser River or the brutal machine gun nests. The Veterans Administration in the 1950s simply handed traumatized men standard discharge papers and expected them to instantly assimilate into quiet civilian life. Instead, the Hollywood studio system sternly demanded he put on a scarred face and relentlessly project pure, unadulterated violence for the rolling cameras. To physically endure the relentless psychological pressure of playing ruthless gangsters while hiding severe combat nightmares, the actor systematically self-medicated. He explicitly confirmed this brutal reality later in life, stating with cold, accurate precision that alcohol became his medicine. The cheap, hard liquor numbed the sharp neurological spikes. It forcefully shut down the vivid, terrifying flashbacks of heavy German artillery fire. But this specific survival strategy was a severely toxic, intensely lethal bargain. The relentless daily consumption of alcohol fundamentally ravaged his physical body. The actor did not simply enjoy a casual drink after a long day on the busy studio lot. The addict fiercely consumed colossal quantities of hard liquor, plunging into chronic, severe alcoholism. The brutal physical effects of this heavy chemical dependency quickly became totally visible. The toxic levels of daily alcohol severely damaged his internal organs and severely compromised his fragile immune system. Combined with an intense, constant chain-smoking habit, the heavy drinking accelerated his physical decline. The performer frequently arrived on active television sets visibly hungover, sweating, and physically shaking. His central nervous system was fully compromised by the constant barrage of toxic chemicals. Yet the powerful studio executives simply looked the other way, as long as the veteran successfully delivered the required tough guy dialogue. The American entertainment machine ignored the aggressive physical deterioration happening right in front of the camera lenses. They watched a decorated war hero slowly drink himself into an early grave. The industry enabled the destructive behavior specifically because the alcohol maintained the highly profitable, exceptionally menacing on-screen aura. A slightly drunk, unpredictable actor simply looked much scarier on the silver screen. The absolute darkest intersection between his severe untreated chemical dependency and his fictional Hollywood career violently occurred in 1960. The major studio executives cast him in the anticipated, promoted feature film adaptation of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Brand definitely did not play a standard mobster holding a prop machine gun this time. The director explicitly assigned the actor the incredibly complex role of Pap Finn, the abusive, severely alcoholic father of the main character. The subsequent on-screen performance is widely praised by contemporary film historians as incredibly authentic, raw, and intensely terrifying. The talent stumbled across the physical set, slurring his words, projecting wild, unpredictable rage directly at the surrounding cast members. The performer perfectly captured the exact physical mechanics of a man wholly consumed by chronic addiction. The theatrical audiences and the professional film critics believed they were watching a masterful, superbly technical acting performance. They praised his deep commitment to the difficult character. The brutal, unspoken reality was vastly different. The veteran was absolutely not utilizing deep, intensely sophisticated method acting techniques. The man was dropping the heavy professional mask and exposing his own real-life chemical addiction directly to the camera lens. The violent physical shakes, the aggressive drunken outbursts, and the hollow stare were genuine. The major studios essentially paid the severely traumatized combat veteran to publicly document his own active physical and psychological destruction for mass entertainment. The strict dividing line between the fictional alcoholic character and the real dying man entirely vanished on that specific movie set. The victim was broadcasting a desperate cry for medical help directly into American movie theaters, but the audience simply bought tickets and ate popcorn. The entertainment industry successfully commercialized his untreated trauma and his active physical addiction, refusing to offer any genuine medical intervention. The heavy liquor brutally destroyed his internal organs and thoroughly alienated his professional colleagues. The star deliberately pushed away the chaotic Hollywood social scene, isolating himself from the shallow studio parties and the aggressive public relations events. The actor withdrew into a highly isolated, deeply guarded private existence. But the hardened veteran still possessed one safe, private, physical refuge. Behind the heavy locked doors of his personal home, the actor actively built a colossal, unexpected sanctuary. The intellectual meticulously collected over 30,000 rare, intensely valuable books. The large man, widely known for throwing violent barroom punches on network television, actually spent his private time quietly reading dense historical biographies, complex classical literature, and heavy poetry. His personal library was his absolute only genuine escape from the brutal cinematic violence and the lingering combat memories. The physical books offered deep, silent comfort and strict intellectual order in an utterly chaotic, heavily traumatized mind. But even this quiet, deeply intellectual sanctuary was doomed. A terrifying physical disaster unexpectedly struck his private residence, brutally wiping out the enormous book collection in a matter of terrifying minutes. What exactly was the sudden catastrophic event that violently ripped away his final safe haven and directly forced his ashes to be permanently encased inside a stone book? The sudden catastrophic event that violently ripped away his final safe haven struck his private Malibu residence without any warning. Behind the heavy wooden doors of that specific coastal house, The actor lived a different reality from his massive Hollywood public persona. The studio audiences broadly assumed he spent his free time drinking heavily in dark bars and starting violent fistfights. The brutal truth was sharply different. Brand was a dedicated, committed intellectual. Fellow actor Richard Peabody, who worked alongside the veteran on the massive television series The Untouchables, frequently visited the Malibu property. Peabody explicitly described the interior of the house in highly specific physical terms. The co-star stated clearly that the residence looked exactly like a library. The entire physical space was mostly dominated by towering wooden shelves fully packed with over 30,000 rare, fiercely expensive books. The collection included deep historical volumes, complex classical literature, and heavy military history. The hardened war hero spent thousands of hours sitting quietly in a chair, meticulously reading and extensively annotating the thick pages. His severely scarred hands gently turned delicate paper pages for hours on end. The survivor used the dense intellectual material to forcefully anchor his heavily traumatized mind. The vast physical library served as a fortified psychological bunker, completely shielding the aging veteran from the chaotic, entirely superficial entertainment industry and the relentless, screaming memories of the European battlefield. The books were his absolute most valuable physical possession. The entertainment press ignored this intellectual pursuit because a well-read, highly educated scholar simply did not fit the intensely profitable narrative of a terrifying street thug. But a physical disaster destroyed that highly secure intellectual bunker. A sudden, intensely violent fire erupted directly inside the Malibu home. The fast-moving flames fiercely tore through the wooden structure, instantly consuming the dry, flammable paper pages of the 30,000 books. The heavy smoke and extreme heat engulfed the whole property in a matter of terrifying minutes. The homeowner physically escaped the burning structure, but he helplessly watched the raging inferno utterly obliterate his private world. The fire did not simply burn expensive furniture or standard Hollywood wardrobe costumes. The aggressive flames systematically destroyed his entire colossal book collection. Every single volume he meticulously collected to calm his severe post-traumatic stress disorder was instantly reduced to a massive pile of useless gray ash. Furthermore, the intense heat destroyed his irreplaceable military memorabilia. The physical Silver Star he earned for bravely destroying the German machine gun nest, and the Purple Heart he received for the massive gunshot wound at the Weser River were entirely consumed by the fire. The extreme temperatures literally melted the bronze and silver alloys directly into the charred floorboards. Neighbors vividly recalled seeing the imposing television star standing silently on the sidewalk. The homeowner was covered in dark soot, staring blankly at the collapsing roof. The local fire department arrived too late to salvage any meaningful possessions from the primary structure. The intense blaze burned so ferociously that it actually cracked the solid concrete foundation of the coastal home. His original military uniform and the highly personal photographs of his fallen comrades in the 83rd Infantry Division vanished in the thick black smoke. The blaze brutally stripped the veteran of his entire intellectual identity and fully erased the physical evidence of his military sacrifice. The psychological devastation caused by this specific physical loss was massive and permanent. The resident literally watched his only safe space utterly burn to the ground, leaving absolutely nothing but smoking debris. The devastating Malibu fire officially marked the definitive end of his active public life. The veteran did not actively attempt to rebuild the library or purchase a new, expensive Hollywood estate. The sudden, brutal loss of his psychological sanctuary completely broke his remaining mental resilience. The pioneer rapidly withdrew from the American entertainment industry. The veteran stopped accepting new television scripts and entirely cut off all physical contact with his former studio colleagues. The former television star pushed himself into severe, highly rigid social isolation. The American social system is notoriously brutal toward aging individuals who lack a strong, truly active support network. The entertainment industry offers no formal pension plans or reliable medical insurance for faded character actors. Once a performer stops generating direct box office revenue, the studio executives instantly erase their phone numbers. The aging veteran found himself adrift in a modern society that only valued his youthful menace. Without the steady influx of studio paychecks, the aging actor rapidly faced severe, truly crippling financial difficulties. The medical treatment for chronic alcoholism and the heavy prescription drugs required to manage his rapidly deteriorating lungs completely drained his remaining bank accounts. The medical system in the United States shows zero mercy to elderly patients lacking financial resources. The retiree quietly moved away from the expensive coastal properties and disappeared into the harsh anonymous background of the California suburbs. The old soldier lived utterly alone, heavily relying on meager veteran disability checks and minimal acting residuals. The man who previously carried a television series and bravely fought on the brutal front lines of the Second World War was now just another forgotten, truly impoverished elderly citizen, struggling to survive in a cold, indifferent society. The Hollywood machine entirely moved on, instantly replacing the aging veteran with younger aggressive actors willing to play the new generation of cinematic villains. The physical and financial decline pushed the veteran directly into that sterile, completely isolated medical room inside Sutter General Hospital. His physical body is entirely broken. His bank accounts are thoroughly empty. His 30,000 books are entirely gone, heavily reduced to scattered ash decades ago. The physical metals proving his heroism were entirely melted down by the aggressive Malibu fire. As the 71-year-old man lies quietly on the stiff hospital bed, literally suffocating from severe terminal emphysema, the television sets in the surrounding patient rooms are probably broadcasting widely syndicated reruns of his old violent mobster roles. The American public is watching the terrifying screen thug handle prop weapons, unaware of the actual man dying silently just down the hall. But as the medical monitors finally flatline, a colossal, uncomfortable question remains completely unanswered. Will anyone in the entertainment industry actually remember the genuine, highly decorated American war hero who bravely bled in the freezing mud? Or will the cold Hollywood machine permanently bury the true Neville brand under the fictional, highly profitable face of a ruthless street criminal? The devastating Malibu fire forcefully pushed the aging actor directly into strict physical isolation, leaving his public legacy completely vulnerable to wild historical distortion. Decades after his active Hollywood career officially ended, a stubbornly persistent rumor rapidly circulated across modern internet forums and historical military message boards. The American public deeply loves an exaggerated cinematic narrative, desperately wanting their on-screen heroes to possess unbeatable, mythical, historical backgrounds. This specific viral rumor boldly claims that Neville Brand was officially the fourth most decorated combat soldier in the entire history of the United States military during the Second World War. Some circulated digital articles and vastly exaggerated Hollywood press clippings even falsely suggested he was the absolute most decorated infantryman in the entire European theater, strictly surpassing every single living veteran. To maintain historical accuracy, we must forcefully open the classified United States Department of Defense archives and read the cold, strict numerical truth. We must firmly shatter this specific fabricated myth right here. Brand absolutely did not rank at the very top of that specific numerical military list. Famous historical figures like Audie Murphy firmly and legally hold those extreme statistical records. The entertainment industry simply loves to inflate physical statistics to quickly sell a better promotional narrative. The actor did not officially rank as the fourth most decorated soldier globally. However, factually correcting this specific exaggerated rumor does not diminish his genuine, undeniable physical heroism. The objective military truth is actually far more compelling than the cheap internet fiction. The official military records confirm an incredibly impressive, rigorously verified collection of military hardware. The hero officially earned the Silver Star. This is the third highest military combat decoration, strictly awarded exclusively for extreme gallantry in active, dangerous action against a hostile enemy force. The infantryman legally earned this massive distinction for bravely charging the heavily fortified German machine gun nest completely alone. The casualty legally received the Purple Heart for taking a high-velocity enemy bullet directly through his right bicep at the Weser River. The Purple Heart is a solemn, deeply respected military award, strictly given only to those physically wounded by direct enemy action. The military also officially awarded him the Bronze Star for truly meritorious physical service in active combat zones. This specific, verified combination of prestigious military medals permanently places the veteran directly inside the highest upper echelon of American combat bravery. He did not need wildly fabricated studio PR campaigns to actively validate his extreme combat survival. The survivor was a genuine, thoroughly verified American hero, period. But the impressive physical medals could not protect him from his own destructive coping mechanisms. As he slowly aged in complete California isolation, the massive quantities of cheap alcohol and heavy daily tobacco quickly began collecting their brutal biological debts. You cannot relentlessly chain-smoke heavy unfiltered cigarettes for 40 consecutive years to violently suppress severe combat trauma without facing catastrophic physical consequences. By the late 1980s, the physical health of the veteran collapsed. The official medical diagnosis was severe, terminal emphysema. This specific respiratory disease is an incredibly cruel, agonizing biological decline. Emphysema is not a sudden, rapid physical failure. It is an intensely protracted, deeply exhausting respiratory strangulation. The harsh, toxic tobacco smoke systematically destroyed the delicate microscopic air sacs, officially known as alveoli, entirely hidden deep inside his lungs. When these critical microscopic air sacs are damaged, they lose their elastic physical properties. The rigid medical files strictly detail a massive, intensely progressive loss of basic respiratory function. The hardened television star could no longer breathe normally. Every single physical intake of vital oxygen became an entirely exhausting bodily struggle. The patient spent his isolated final years tethered to loud, mechanical oxygen machines just to successfully draw a basic breath. The heavy plastic oxygen tubes physically strapped to his face became a constant, truly depressing, permanent medical reality. The man who sprinted through deep freezing mud, dodging Nazi artillery fire, was now physically trapped inside a small suburban bedroom, literally suffocating inside his own failing chest cavity. The cheap, hard liquor had already compromised his liver function and severely weakened his internal immune system. Decades of severe chronic alcoholism directly resulted in massive hepatic scarring and extremely dangerous internal inflammation. The American medical establishment could do nothing to medically reverse decades of severe, untreated self-medication. The highly expensive, strictly privatized healthcare system in the United States offers very little genuine comfort for highly impoverished, entirely forgotten elderly veterans. The doctors simply prescribed pain management drugs and waited for his damaged biological systems to shut down. the forgotten hero simply faded away in a cold, strictly clinical medical environment. The brutal physical end officially arrived on April 16, 1992. Inside a sterile, entirely quiet medical ward at Sutter General Hospital in Sacramento, California, the biological struggle finally ended. The severely damaged heart of the veteran officially stopped pumping. The electronic medical monitors strictly recorded a silent flatline. Neville Brand was exactly 71 years old. The old soldier passed away surrounded by heavy silence. There was no widely publicized Hollywood funeral. The major, powerful studio executives, who greedily profited from his scarred face for decades, absolutely did not organize a public memorial service. The fiercely aggressive entertainment machine ignored his quiet passing. The veteran died completely isolated from the cinematic world that exploited his severe psychological trauma to actively sell movie tickets. The casualty simply slipped away quietly, exactly like thousands of other entirely forgotten World War II veterans who slowly deteriorated in anonymous state nursing homes. Following the quiet official pronouncement of death, his physical remains were immediately transported by the grieving relatives for a standard, private cremation. The physical body that physically absorbed extreme military violence and heavy cinematic punches was entirely reduced to silent gray ash. But when the surviving family members officially received his cremated remains, they finally made a specific, unorthodox choice. They absolutely refused to place the deeply decorated war hero inside a standard ceramic cemetery vase. The relatives explicitly rejected the standard cheap wooden urns traditionally provided by the standard funeral directors. The family jointly designed a uniquely customized, heavily symbolic physical container for his final resting place. They deliberately chose a physical shape that completely defied his violent, deeply terrifying on-screen public persona. What exact physical shape did the grieving family deliberately choose to permanently house the ashes of the ultimate Hollywood heavy? The grieving family chose a specific, symbolic physical shape to permanently house the ashes of the ultimate Hollywood heavy. When you physically return to that quiet columbarium niche inside East Lawn Memorial Park, the customized stone book finally makes complete, undeniable sense. The decidedly unusual object is not a random, meaningless artistic decoration. It is a deeply deliberate, physical compensation for the 30,000-volume library violently destroyed by the sudden Malibu fire. The surviving relatives strictly utilized that heavy stone spine to permanently honor his genuine, deeply intellectual identity. The veteran was a profoundly educated, intensely complex thinker, trapped inside the intimidating physical body of a cinematic brute. The carved stone book formally restores the psychological dignity that the powerful entertainment industry systematically stripped away for over 3 decades. It officially operates as a permanent, silent rebellion against the deeply superficial Hollywood casting machine. The television and film system aggressively looked directly at a genuine, decorated American war hero and saw a vastly profitable, terrifying villain. He was mercilessly forced to play ruthless criminals, violent mobsters, and intensely sadistic street thugs completely because his deeply weathered face carried the heavy, permanent physical scars of real military combat. The traumatized veteran drank quantities of cheap hard liquor strictly to artificially silence the deafening sound of heavy German machine guns echoing inside his severely fractured mind. The actor knowingly traded his physical health, deeply destroying his own fragile lungs and internal organs, to successfully maintain a deeply fictional Hollywood persona. When the aging actor finally built a fiercely secure, intellectual, physical sanctuary away from the toxic entertainment industry, a catastrophic house fire brutally ripped the entire historical collection away in a matter of minutes. The American public loudly cheered for his violent fictional characters, continuously generating massive corporate studio revenue, while the actual human being slowly suffocated in physical, psychological, and financial isolation inside a sterile, entirely forgotten Sacramento hospital ward. The brutal, agonizing historical journey of Neville Brand has officially closed. The veteran was definitely not a ruthless, natural-born street thug or a mindless cinematic monster. He was a decorated, incredibly brave combat infantryman who bravely charged enemy lines and rightfully earned the prestigious Silver Star. The soldier permanently left a piece of his shattered psychological soul bleeding on the freezing muddy banks of the Weser River in 1945. The customized stone book securely holding his physical ashes today remains the absolute clearest historical proof of his heavily concealed, truly genuine identity. It firmly stands as a silent, permanent warning to the modern viewing public. You must be incredibly careful when blindly judging a complex human being strictly by the aggressive, highly fictional roles that a brutal, completely unforgiving society forcefully demands they play. The applause faded long ago, leaving behind only unpaid debts and shattered lives. What are your thoughts on the harsh lives behind the fame? Leave a comment below. If you liked this video, hit subscribe to join us behind the scenes of hidden legends. Thank you for watching and goodbye.